Welcome back to the Math Mastery Series, Navigating Success at Oakland Community College. My name is Julie Gunkelman, and I have been talking to you about these two books that I read, Teach Your Students How to Learn and Teach Yourself How to Learn by Sandra Yancey McGuire with Stephanie McGuire. McGuire really focuses a lot on Bloom's taxonomy. I added this piece that I've had in every video so far in the series that to remind you that eventually the mimicking, the learning to math by mimicking is going to fail, right? The I do, we do, you do eventually is going to fail. And even though McGuire doesn't have it in the book, it is prevalent in research. So please, right? Hopefully if you get anything from this video series is that you need to do something different. The last three things that she suggests in her book are to teach, working in groups or pairs, and practice exams. So I want to touch on each of these in this video. Okay, teaching. McGuire asks her students, and she teaches chemistry, she asks her students, how do you think you would do on an exam if you just prepared to try to get an A, or you prepared well enough to teach the material, right? And the students always say that preparing to teach, you're going to know the material much better. And so that's what she wants you to do. She wants you to focus on knowing this material so well that you can teach it to someone else. And in fact, she wants you to practice teaching it to someone else, whether it be, a family member, a friend, someone else in the class, right? You could take turns, working with your peers, trying to teach this material to someone else. So it's not just the act of preparing, which you want to do, of course, but it's also speaking it. And especially with math, being a different kind of language, you want to be able to speak that math and be very clear. If you don't have humans, right, that you can do this with, she suggests just making yourself any old audience, right? Maybe it's stuffed animals or your pet, right? They will listen to you, right? And obviously you can't get feedback from them, but you still have the experience of teaching that lesson. Another thing that she suggests that you do if you don't have this opportunity already is to work in a group or a pair. She did say pairs, I think, not group. My students work in groups in my class, and so I'm used to that. If you don't have a class that already has groups, form your own, right? Like if you're not working in a group in class, and even if you are working in a group in class, doing this outside of class is going to be so beneficial to you. The more that you can practice the language of math, the writing it, speaking it, hearing it from somebody else, the better you're going to be at it. Just like if you were trying to learn Spanish or French, it's the same thing. You want to keep practicing the language. So the more people that you have to work with for that, the better it's going to be. Whether you're doing this in class, this is an activity that I use to explain things to each other. So the person who has the marker is listening to the person who is speaking, and they're telling them what to do. It would be kind of similar for, telling you, teaching a lesson. Right? These students were explaining how to do things to each other, that they were taking one line of a problem, doing it, and then giving it to the next person. The next person had to pick up from there. Maybe it's some activities that you're doing together, right? So maybe some kind of puzzle or even just practice problems, right? Working on those together is going to be a much richer experience than if you're just by yourself, again, because of the language. Okay, the last thing McGuire says that you should be doing is making yourself a practice exam. I'm not talking about going to your instructor and asking for an exam. That's not what this is about, right? This is actually writing your own exam. And I assigned this as an assignment in my classes this semester for my trig and calculus class. The assignment was very vague on purpose. They were kind of frustrated with me because I wanted them to come up with their own list of objectives and then match questions with it. And they were graded based on how they came up. Now, for some of the questions, I think they were harder on themselves to write the test than I actually was at the time when I wrote the exam. Some of them were a little bit tougher, thinking, oh my gosh, Gunkelman's going to make this so hard, this particular area. But students told me, it was about half of them told me that this was a very effective tool. Now, Sandra talks about in the book when she says, hey, if you do 9 of these 10 things, you're going to do great in the class, right? I don't know that the students did all the other things before this, because this was right at the beginning of the semester and they didn't have all the other things in place yet. So they might feel differently now. But if half of them thought of that like at the beginning of the semester, it's probably a pretty good idea. Now, it does get tricky to write your own problems sometimes because you don't know how they're going to turn out. So writing your own problems, yes, you can come up with your own examples, like to try to write them from scratch. Sometimes that's difficult, so you might have to turn to the book as a resource, and that's okay. So writing your own exam, you're kind of putting the problems together. Like you're not just opening your book and doing the one that they have in the book, right? You're trying to pull your own problems. If at all you can write your own problems, please do that, right? So I did this with my students in calculus this semester, where they had to write their own limit problem that had a certain technique that they were going to use, right? So if you can do something like that, that would be helpful. We did it in calculus as did I just say limits? I think I might have just said limits. I did it in another class that wasn't one of these 5 that we're working on in the gateway, so I can't use it as an example. But I did limits already. We also did derivatives, right? Like you have to use a certain rule. Like write a problem that's going to require a certain rule. That's going to help you understand things so much better if you can write those own problems. And all those apps that I kind of dissed, right? If you write your own problem and it doesn't turn out the way that you thought when you try to work it out, you can always check it with one of those apps, right? So that might be a good application of one of those. So this whole video series has been about taking things in your short-term memory. You don't have much time. Research shows it's just mere seconds to try to get it to encode into your long-term memory. If you think about this, right? If you think about what you had for lunch on September 25th, 2011, who's going to know that, right? And it's because your brain is designed to forget these things. It's trying to protect you, but when it's working against you when you're trying to learn the math, right? So that's why encoding is so important. You want to encode these lessons, this information into your long-term memory. When you go to practice it, that's the retrieval part, right? So encoding, if you think about it, it was the lessons that I talked about when I said we want to preview. You want to, see, I'm looking into my long-term memory now, right? You want to preview, you want to prepare for active learning, come up with those central questions. You do want to look at, I said active learning. I didn't mean that. I meant reading. You want to be actively reading your book, of course, and then also your notes. You want to be able to paraphrase those notes and summarize them. And remember that paraphrasing, you got to keep going back and layering in all the information. So she wants you to read just one paragraph, load all those things in together. I've kind of lost track in my list in my head, so I might repeat myself here. You also want the textbook. That was the 5th thing on your list, right? You want the textbook. You always want to buy the textbook. It's a great resource. It helps you fill in the gaps. Remember, your instructor's an expert in the field. And so when they give you a lecture, they give you a video notes, whatever they're giving you for their content, they understand all the things that are behind it. So you want to make sure that you have that textbook to kind of fit everything together there, right? That's going to help you out. When you're taking your notes, you want to make sure that you're handwriting them, right? You want to handwrite all your notes, and you do want to stop, especially if you're taking notes with a video, you want to stop and fill in the gaps along the way in terms of your outline or your concept map, whatever you're using for that. Remember those buckets of information that you got from the preview? You want to make sure that you're filling those buckets, right? And don't wait for the end of the video. Make sure you're doing it along the way. If you have a live lecture, remember in the last video I said, hey, it's okay. Go ahead and get yourself some sticky notes so that you know to come back to things. And you want to do it as soon as possible after the lecture. I think the research says you lose like 50% after 24 hours. You can't afford to do that, right? You got to do it sooner. You've got to synthesize all that stuff and get it into your long-term memory. The homework, you're practicing that retrieval process, right? You're trying to get those things out, practice them. Remember, you're going to practice your homework as if it were a test every single time. The things we talked about today are going to help you more with the encoding probably, and somewhat with the retrieval. There is research that says when you are testing yourself, that even if you don't know anything about it, it kind of primes your brain to learn it. So testing yourself obviously is a good idea, and writing your own practice exam is going to be worthwhile. Don't forget to work in groups with each other. And then also you want to try to teach the lesson. Some research says you want to teach it like you're teaching it to a 5-year-old. That might be a little too simple in terms of language for some of the things that we're doing in math. So aim a little bit higher for that. If you are an OCC student and you're interested in getting some help from me this semester because you found interest in this video series, I am meeting with students in the winter of 2024 in Math 1150, 1540, 1560, 1580, 1730. I'm meeting them on January 11th at 7 p.m. or on Friday, January 12th at 1 p.m. If you can't attend one of those sessions, please register anyway so that I give you a recording of the video. Please use your OCC email address to register, and you can go to bit.ly/meetgunk to register for this Zoom session. You want to meet with me in person and you're an OCC student in one of these 5 classes, 1150, 1540, 1560, 1580, and 1730, awesome. I'm meeting students in the winter of 2024 in person and on Zoom. Please use your OCC email address when you make an appointment with me, and you can do that by going to calendly.com/jgunk. Thank you for watching today's lesson on the continuation of this Math Mastery Series, Navigating Success at Oakland Community College. Even though I've touched on all the big things from McGuire's book, I've got 2 more videos for you that are going to help you with your learning of mathematics. Stay tuned.